transform its own society, to educate its population, and to grow, and to become a global player. So we need peace to do all that. The status quo is not a time to relax and do nothing, because the clock is ticking. The status quo buys time to do things that need to be done in order to create hope for the future. If this time is wasted, it can lead to tragedy. So I'm always concerned when politicians talk about the status quo as if the status quo is a stable state. It is not a stable state. It is a transient, but it's a variable transient to do things. Okay.
So, do you think that suppose there's no foreign intervention? For example, we all know the cross-strait relation become worse, especially in the last few years, partly because of the U.S. and the mainland China contest. Without such confrontation, would this past of 5 or 6 decades be considered is already a state that is gradually converging to a steady state?
The reason why relations have gotten worse is because the U.S. is increasingly threatened by a rising China. China does not threaten the U.S. Militarily, but China threatens U.S. dominance in the world. And because of this, U.S. strategic preoccupation now is with trying to slow China down, contain China, pull down China if possible. So all of us are familiar with the chip war, which is going on, and the systematic effort done by whole departments in Washington to find ways to slow down China, to degrade China, if possible. Of course, whether they succeed or not depends on how China responds. So Taiwan is caught in this larger struggle. So the question for Taiwan is this: you cannot affect U.S.-China relations, but you can decide how much you want to be used by America against China. If you decide that you want to be used by America against China in the hope that one day there is a chance the door opens and you rush out and become independent, then understand that there is a big risk involved. But I think it is better for ordinary people who only want peaceful lives for themselves and their children to say, look, don't drag me in. This is your fight. This is your fight. So you notice that how much Taiwan green leaders may want to push. They are limited to what the US allows them to do. So the US will not allow Taiwan to affect their game. But if you allow yourself to be used by the US, you will be used by the US when it's convenient for the US. And if it's no longer convenient for the US, Taiwan will be separated, which was what happened in 1972. So I think if I were Taiwanese, I say no. I need the US because it improves my relationship, my negotiating position with China, but do not become a plaything of the US. Then all of us, our lives are at risk.
Yeah. Would you please add your comments to that?
May I add a point? So George, I agree with you that the status quo may not be permanent, may not be forever. But at the same time, we have to define what the status quo means for Taiwan. Actually, to me, the status quo means peace and stability, and also cooperation and development. Because over the past 74 years, since 1949, we have tried everything to maintain peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. In fact, because of we maintain peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait and also in the region, so all countries, including mainland China, including ASEAN countries, including Japan and South Korea, can enjoy such sustainable growth and economic development. So this is really unprecedented and sustainable. So we want to make sure that peace and stability can continue. At the same time, I also agree with you that the United States actually doesn't want to see Taiwan's unification with China. At the same time, China doesn't want to see Taiwan's independence. So there's a dilemma we have to face. At the same time, we have to take into account how we can maintain peace and stability. So for the moment, it seems to me that we have only one option. The option is peace. The option is also how to maintain the status quo. And maintaining the status quo for as long as possible is also in the best interest of all parties concerned. It's also consistent with U.S. interest for the region. And also given the context of U.S.-China strategic competition or great power competition in the region. So Taiwan certainly can take that into account and see how we can cope with the situation, and we can try to maintain peace and stability while in cooperation, in partnership with the United States, with Japan and other like-minded countries. So I think this is still the top priority for Taiwan for the moment.
Okay, thank you. Philip, can you also say something about this, especially about the period of time? If this is just considered transient, and what can we really do during this time period? George just mentioned that at such a time the opportunity is precious. So how can we utilize this period of time to do something to move forward?
Okay, thank you. Let me respond to Professor Huang's first questions together with Mr. Yu's responses to that. I agree that the U.S.-China hegemonic competition is one of the most important factors leading to frustrated instability as well as the fluctuations in the trilateral relations between the U.S., Taiwan, and China. So in that sense, the current sort of situation or peace is probably to some extent fragile and transient a little bit, right? On the other hand, I guess we have to pay attention to the fact that it is also closely related to Beijing's anxiety about Taiwan public opinion's increasing drifting away from the prospect of unification. For example, there has been a long-standing public opinion survey in Taiwan examining Taiwan people's national identity pattern. In that questions, over the past 2 decades or so, there's only one question and 3 options provided in the questions. The first is whether you identify yourself as a Taiwanese only. The second is that whether you identify yourself as a Chinese only. And the third one is whether you identify yourself both as a Taiwanese and a Chinese. Well, when this public opinion survey began about 3 decades ago, the relative majority, not absolute, but the relative majority was the dual identity, the third option, okay? Which I guess consisted with the mainstream public opinion in Taiwan preferring the maintenance of status quo. However, about 15 years ago, this began to change. The preference for exclusive Taiwanese identity, which is the first option I just mentioned, began to override the respondents favoring the third option. And this sort of changing reality, I guess, is transparent. It's a transparent information for Beijing. And I guess that adds tremendously to Beijing's anxiety that Taiwan seems to be drifting increasingly away from the prospect of unification or the formula of unification set by Beijing. So I think that was a very important factor. And that began to emerge long before the hegemonic competition between the US and China that began roughly around the year 2017. So that's something I want to add. Thank you.
It seems that given such information, does it give mainland China some urgent feeling that they need to do something in a short-term course?
with Minister Yo's comment when he was made the keynote speech that probably the first priority for Beijing would still be to solve cross-strait disputes or to unify Taiwan through peaceful rather than military means. However, as we know that the predominant view or predominant preference of mainstream public opinion in Taiwan has been favoring the maintenance of status quo compared to the other two options, independence or unification. So I think that's also something that has put important constraint on any ruler or political party in Taiwan. And I think that's also a transparent information for Beijing as well. So in that sense, I think Beijing has also not given up the possible sort of second priority option by unifying Taiwan through military means. So that's why we've seen the mounting coercive pressures from Beijing, especially in the realm of military security upon Taiwan. So I guess that Beijing has a sort of sense of chronic crisis or urgency, for it to launch such pressures on Taiwan.
We just mentioned that most Taiwanese do support the status quo and do not want to see the current situation be changed. And it strikes me that any move that breaks the status quo would create more instability and unpredictability of the future. So given the current Taiwanese mentality and this unpredictability, so why should Taiwan initiate a move toward merger, as you suggested, George?
I always remember what Lee Kuan Yew told us when I was in his cabinet. He said, never govern by polling. Never govern by polling. Because if you are governing by polling, you are not leading, you are being led. And if a society is being led by polls, you will lead to tragedy. And very often, when you are striking new directions, the leader is in the minority. So I'm familiar with all these polls, and I'm sure the mainland is concerned, but the key is leadership, not polls. And leadership must see further than the people being polled. That's why you're a leader. You must look ahead, see the trends, where the dangers are, and say, no, we cannot go that way. You may always think that way is easier, but you will lead to disaster. No, we take the difficult route, because after that, it will be a bright future. So this is my response to the idea of polling. The time that we have during the status quo must be time that we use to build trust. Find common areas. If I do not want to be your friend, I will find reasons why we should not meet, why we should be angry with each other. And every little fault is magnified. But if I want to be your friend, and you want to be my friend, we will find common areas. And concentrate on common areas. And say the difficult things, let's put aside. Find common areas. And after a while, trust grows. And as the circle of trust grows, the overlap increases and all kinds of possibilities, not possible in the past, will emerge. And it is a bit troubling the way education is being pursued, because education influences young minds. I watched in Hong Kong what happened. I'm not saying that the situation is the same here. I was told by a young student who saw me out as a mentor when I was working there. He was only 16 years old. He said, 80% of my teachers are anti-China. And so they became anti-China. And to be a student leader, you had to be anti-China. And it led to a mass illusion that they can be independent. And when you build your hopes on an illusion, it leads to tragedy. So leaders have to say, no, this will lead to tragedy. Look ahead. So trust is important, and it's important not to the younger generation create more distrust. Because if there's more distrust, then the area of overlap reduces, and unhappy outcome in the future is more likely. So the status quo is not a time to do nothing, it's a time to do a lot of things. And there's a certain, in my view, urgency to it.
Okay, I understand your point. Of course, given the current Taiwan situation, I'm not very sure that any leader can choose to ignore the poll or those surveys. And I think there's one thing different between Taiwan and Singapore, that because I agree with you that the reason why we need a leader, because we need the leader's vision and also his courage to take sometimes bold action and to do something. But given the Taiwan situation, we don't just have one leader, not like in Singapore. You have Lee Kuan-yew. But in Taiwan, in early time, President Lee Teng-hui has his view on Taiwan's future. That's why he chose something that he did. And later on, President Ma Ying-jeou has his view, and he was brave enough to push lots of things. And the current president, Tsai Ing-wen, she also has her own views. So how can we say one leader's view is better, will lead Taiwan to a better future rather than another one's view? So we don't just have a single view on this.
So George, I agree with you that both leadership and understanding polls are important. Leadership may be more important. But in Taiwan's case, of course, we have regular elections, presidential elections, parliamentary elections. So for all leaders, they have to consider the support approval rating from the general public. So when the majority of our people in Taiwan support the status quo, then of course that is one element we have to take into account. On the other hand, I also like to point out that maintaining status quo is not only a strategy, actually that's the direction for the future. At the same time, of course, we need to strengthen our values. You mentioned earlier that Taiwan is a valuable asset, not only for ourselves, but also for the United States, for mainland China, for the entire world. So Taiwan needs to further develop and strengthen Taiwan's values, Taiwan's strength, economically and strategically, including TSMC. I mentioned this the other day. Taiwan already has the largest semiconductor industry in the world. That is also a strength for Taiwan's values. And then Taiwan, of course, is very strategically located. We are in the center of the first island chain. So we can really provide all the opportunities to facilitate trade, sea transportation, air transportation for the region. Taiwan is an important linkage between Northeast Asia and Southeast Asia. So we need to expand all these activities. We need to make other countries understand Taiwan's values, Taiwan's strength. And that is also the guarantee for Taiwan to maintain the path of peace and stability, and also in our way to cope with